On an unusually crisp March morning in London, the heavy grey clouds hung low over Kensington Palace, as though the city itself anticipated another royal storm. Inside the walls of the palace, however, it seemed for a fleeting moment as if a fragile peace had settled among the younger generation of royals. It had been over 3 years since Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped away from royal duties and decamped to California, leaving behind headlines and heartache in equal measure. Since then, the so-called Fab Four, once hailed as the bright future of the monarchy, had become nothing more than a bitter memory. Kate and William carried on with their responsibilities stoically. Harry and Meghan reinvented themselves across the Atlantic. But even the most determined royal aides couldn't erase the undercurrent of tension that persisted in the air whenever their names were mentioned in the same breath. And now, after months of private negotiations and carefully worded invitations, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had flown back to London for a charitable event commemorating Diana's legacy. For Catherine, Princess of Wales, the prospect of seeing Meghan again filled her with quiet dread. Kate had always maintained her composure in public and in private, and though she'd privately confided to her mother that the accusations Meghan hurled at her in that infamous Oprah interview had cut her to the core, she never allowed her pain to show. Her smile stayed perfect, her words gracious, even as tabloids screamed about a feud that neither sister-in-law seemed willing to mend. William, on the other hand, had taken it differently. His temper, inherited from his father and his legendary grandmother in equal measure, burned hot. He could forgive a lot, but seeing his wife dragged into the mud for the sake of American ratings and sympathy had left him livid. For months he'd refused even to speak Harry's name in conversation, and even now, aides worried he might not keep his emotions in check. The charity gala was held at Claridge's, a glittering event full of polished marble, hushed chandeliers, and London's finest society buzzing over champagne. Photographers packed the entrance, eager to snap the first image of William and Harry together in years. Meghan arrived first, radiant in a sleek white gown, waving confidently at the cameras. Her every move was deliberate, a practiced elegance that belied the icy glances she received from the British press corps. Then came William and Kate, hand in hand, Kate in a deep emerald dress that shimmered against her dark hair, her smile warm enough to light the room despite the knots in her stomach. They moved gracefully from one group to another, offering small talk and laughter, but both acutely aware of the other couple just feet away. For the first hour, nothing dramatic occurred. William and Harry shook hands stiffly. Meghan and Kate exchanged strained smiles. It was awkward, but civil, and everyone in the room exhaled, believing the evening would pass without incident. But then, in the middle of a toast to Diana's humanitarian spirit, as all eyes turned to Meghan to say a few words about the late princess, something changed. Meghan's smile tightened. She glanced toward Kate, and in a tone just sharp enough to cut through the polite applause, delivered a remark that would echo through the royal halls for days to come. Her words, veiled as a joke but dripping with disdain, landed like a slap. Kate's cheeks flushed as she lowered her gaze to her glass. William froze, his knuckles whitening around the stem of his wine. For the first time all evening, the fragile peace shattered. And in that moment, as the room fell uncomfortably silent, Prince William, heir to the throne, model of royal composure, made a decision. He dropped his napkin onto the table, pushed back his chair, and stormed out into the London night. The doors of Claridge's ballroom swung shut behind him with a sharp, echoing thud, but Prince William hardly noticed. His polished shoes struck the marble floor of the hallway with uncharacteristic force as he strode toward the exit. The cold night air outside barely registered against the heat rising in his chest, his breath coming in short, controlled bursts. Inside the ballroom, all pretense of normalcy had dissolved. Guests whispered behind gloved hands. Cameras flashed as the press craned their necks to see the heir to the throne disappearing into the night. Princess Catherine sat frozen at the table, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on her untouched glass of wine. If anyone noticed the faint quiver in her chin, no one dared mention it. Meghan, for her part, sat back in her chair, her smile cool and inscrutable. Across from her, Harry stared down at his plate, his jaw tight, as though unsure whether to follow his brother or stand by his wife. But William didn't look back. For 3 years he'd swallowed his fury. He'd endured tabloid gossip, ugly accusations, and the growing chasm between him and the brother he'd once considered his closest friend. Through it all, he'd held his tongue, not for his own sake, but for the dignity of the crown. Never complain, never explain, his grandmother had always said, and he had tried, desperately, to live by her example. But tonight was different. He could still hear Meghan's words ringing in his ears. "She wears the crown well," she had said, her voice laced with a cutting sweetness. "Of course, some of us don't need to step on others to shine." The room had gone still as her meaning sank in, an unmistakable barb aimed at Catherine, dredging up the old accusation that Kate had made her cry before her wedding, that she'd been cold, unsupportive, perhaps even jealous. William had seen the way Catherine's smile faltered, the way her fingers tightened around her napkin, as she struggled to maintain her composure in front of 100 watchful eyes. That was enough. A car was already waiting outside, a sleek black Range Rover idling at the curb. The chauffeur jumped to open the door, but William waved him off. He needed no escort. He climbed into the back seat alone and slammed the door shut behind him, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his head in his hand. Memories flooded his mind. Catherine, radiant yet anxious on their wedding day, the quiet tears she'd shed after that interview aired, the way she'd insisted she was fine even when he knew she wasn't. He thought of his mother too, how often she had endured slights and humiliation in the public eye, how no one had truly protected her from the cruelty of court gossip and the press. And now it seemed history was repeating itself. William sat back, his jaw tightening, his blue eyes blazing with something that was no longer just hurt, but resolve. Tonight Meghan had crossed a line. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't care if the cameras caught him losing his composure, didn't care if the papers called him emotional or temperamental. Tonight he would defend his wife, and the memory of his mother, even if it meant tearing open the family's carefully constructed facade. As the car pulled away from the glowing lights of Mayfair and into the dark streets beyond, William reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over Harry's name in his contacts, but after a long moment, he pressed another number instead. "Kensington," he said curtly when the aide answered. "Clear my schedule tomorrow morning, and tell them I'll be making a statement." Even his own voice startled him. Calm, cold, determined. It was time, he thought as the car sped off into the London night, to stop pretending nothing was wrong. By morning the British press was ablaze. Prince William storms out as Meghan insults Kate, screamed the front pages of the Daily Mail. Royal gala erupts into family drama, read the Times. Even the normally restrained BBC led with, tensions flare in public between Sussexes and Wales. At Kensington Palace, aides rushed through the corridors, phones pressed to their ears, their faces tight with worry. The palace switchboard was jammed with calls from journalists, government officials and concerned members of the public. No one, it seemed, could stop talking about what had happened the night before. Yet behind closed doors, William sat alone at his desk, reading through a typed transcript of Meghan's remarks, every word underlined in red. His advisors stood at a respectful distance, silent, waiting for his direction. It wasn't just the insult itself, though that had been galling enough. It was the timing, the deliberate way it had been delivered in front of cameras, dignitaries and charity representatives, sullying what should have been a night to honor his mother. That cut deepest of all. But William was no fool. He knew there was more to this than one unguarded comment. Meghan, for all her faults in his eyes, was not careless. He suspected something deliberate, something calculated, and now, finally, he was ready to find out. He ordered his private secretary, Simon Case, into the room. "Simon," he said evenly, though his knuckles drummed against the wood of the desk, "find out who briefed her." Simon blinked. "Your Royal Highness?" "You heard me," William said, his voice hardening. "She knew things she shouldn't have. About Kate, about our private discussions after the funeral last year. Someone's been feeding her information. I want to know who. Every call, every text, every meeting. Go through them all. No exceptions." Simon hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Spying on the inner circle was not done lightly, even in royal households, but the look in William's eyes left no room for argument. As Simon retreated to begin the inquiry, William rose from his chair and walked to the window. The spring morning outside was bright and cloudless. Yet he felt a chill in his chest. He thought of Harry, once his closest confidant, the brother who had stood at his side through their mother's funeral, who had promised him once, long ago, "It's you and me, Wills, always." How had it come to this? A knock at the door broke his reverie. Catherine stepped in, her usual calm shaken. Her green eyes searched his face, and for a moment she looked as if she might cry. But she didn't. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. William crossed the room in 2 strides and took her hand. "You don't apologize," he told her fiercely. "Not for her, not for any of this." But even as he spoke, a dark suspicion gnawed at the edge of his mind. If Meghan had been so emboldened to humiliate Kate in public, what else had she been told? And by whom? If the palace had a traitor among them, he thought grimly, he would find them. no matter what it cost. Days passed, but the memory of that night at Claridge's refused to fade. The tabloids fed on it ravenously, publishing grainy photos of William storming out, of Catherine's stricken face, of Meghan smirking faintly as though nothing had happened at all. Online, social media waged a digital war, some defending Meghan for speaking her mind, others rallying behind Catherine, calling her the true embodiment of royal dignity. But behind palace gates, William worked quietly, methodically. His private secretary, Simon, returned to his office late one evening, with a folder thick with phone records, meeting schedules, and most damning of all, a printed string of text messages. "We found it," Simon said simply. William read through the evidence in silence. One of his own junior aides, a staffer who had been with him since his Sandhurst days, had been in frequent contact with a Sussex advisor in Montecito. Weeks of carefully worded updates about internal discussions, private tensions, even Catherine's lingering hurt over the Oprah interview, had been passed across the Atlantic. It was a betrayal, not just of William or Catherine, but of the very principle of family loyalty that he had been raised to hold sacred. William dismissed Simon, with a curt nod. He needed no advice on what to do next. The next morning, before dawn broke over London, he summoned the aide to his private office. The conversation was brief. The staffer, pale and shaking, tried to protest, to explain, but William cut him off with a quiet finality that left no room for argument. The man left the palace that morning with his security pass revoked, and his reputation in tatters, but the matter was not over. That evening, as twilight fell over the city, William placed a call he had been dreading for days. Harry answered after only 2 rings. "What is it now?" Harry's voice was defensive, weary. "I know," William said simply. A silence stretched between them. "I know it was fed to her," he continued, his tone steady but cold. "I know how she found the words to humiliate Catherine, and I know who gave them to her. You should know. I've handled it here. But I thought you deserved to hear it from me." Harry didn't respond immediately. William could almost hear him breathing on the other end of the line, a quiet fury rising. "You think this is what Diana would have wanted?" Harry finally said, his voice tight with emotion. "No," William said. "I don't, and neither would she have wanted this." The line went dead. That night, William sat alone in his study, the weight of it all pressing down on him, the betrayal exposed, the offender removed, yet the rift between him and Harry now seemed deeper than ever. When Catherine joined him hours later, slipping silently into the room, she rested a hand on his shoulder, and whispered, "You did what you had to do." William nodded, though he didn't feel triumphant, only tired. Looking out into the dark gardens of Kensington Palace, he thought of his mother again, of the quiet strength she'd carried, and the toll it had taken on her, and he promised himself, and her, that no matter what it cost him, he would not allow history to repeat itself. In the days that followed, the palace moved to draw a line under the incident. The aide's quiet dismissal was never officially linked to the Sussexes, and Meghan's remark was brushed off as a misunderstood quip in an official statement. The tabloids moved on to other scandals, as they always did, but for William and Catherine, nothing quite felt the same. That Sunday morning, William stood at the window of Kensington Palace, watching as the early spring sun cast golden light across the garden. Catherine joined him, her hand slipping naturally into his. They stood in silence for a long while, as birds flitted through the budding trees. Finally Catherine spoke. Do you think you and Harry will ever fix it?" William's eyes darkened for a moment, then soft. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "I want to, for Mum, for the boys, but I won't let him, or her, hurt you again. Not ever." Catherine nodded, her gaze falling on the grass below, but a faint, sad smile tugged at her lip. In her heart, she still hoped that someday, the brothers would find their way back to each other. For now though, William knew his duty lay with her, and with the crown. He squared his shoulders, feeling the weight of history settle over him once more. The monarchy had weathered centuries of storms, scandals, and betrayals, and though his own heart ached with loss, though his brother now felt more like a stranger than family, he resolved to keep moving forward, because the kingdom still stood, and so would he. Somewhere across the ocean, Harry sat alone on his Montecito patio, staring at the Pacific horizon, his phone lying dark on the table beside him. He too wondered if the damage could ever be undone, but for now, silence stretched between them, and the world kept watching. Thank you for watching this powerful royal story. If you were moved by William's fierce defense of Catherine, and the heartbreaking rift with Harry, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe the brothers can ever reconcile? Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to our channel for more dramatic and emotional royal family stories, and click the bell icon so you never miss our latest upload.